Hello everybody and welcome back to FantasyFootballFix.com and to the 22-23 season here on the channel. My name is FPL Phillips, or Eddie, and today we're going to be going through the Elite 11 team reveal and more specifically the Consensus 11. And now if you don't know what the Elite 11 is, it is essentially a group of managers who know what they're talking about FPL. And just to prove it, they've got 52 top 10k and 41 top 5k finishes in FPL between them over the course of their history in playing the game. So yeah, they definitely know how to play this game. So if there's anyone to take advice from your first draft on, you can't get much better than that. So we've combined all their first drafts into one amalgamated Elite 11 team and a first draft for game week 1 that you definitely want to stay tuned for. If you're new around here, do remember that you can subscribe to the channel as well and leave a like if you do enjoy the video. It is much appreciated. But for now, let's get into having a look at this Elite 11 team reveal. So the fresh new graphics are here and ready to go, and this lineup is coming in a 5-3-2 formation, fully confirming that big at the back could be the way to go and might be shaping up as the template even for this year's game, which is very different to the 3-4-3, 3-5-2 kind of system that we normally see in FPL. And let's have a look then in goal, who's going to be lining up between the sticks. It is the 4.5 million price David Raya of Brentford, who does look to be the most popular 4.5 goalkeeper option as it stands in FPL. When we compare him to some of the other 4.5s like Melier and also Robert Sanchez of Brighton, he does come out on top when it looks at FPL points, expected FPL points as well, and also clean sheet potential from last season. In terms of the fixtures, he does actually come out second just to Melier. Leeds are judged to have slightly little better defensive fixtures from the fixture analyzer, which you can check out of course over at FantasyFootballFix.com. However, I just think that Leeds defence still is too unproven from how poor it was last season. That's proven just by how many shots Melier had to face, and of course how many goals they did end up conceding, which made that Melier did make more saves. However, I still think the clean sheet potential just isn't going to be there this season. I like that he's come down from 5 million to 4.5. It makes it more of a tough debate to choose from, but if you're going with a 4.5 keeper, at the moment my favourite is still Raya to go for. If you're looking to go a little bit more expensive, I think Mendy could be a really nice pick from the third best defence in the league last season as well. So yeah, I really do like the look of Mendy at 5 million. Ramsdale still looks a solid option as well. I would probably avoid some of the more expensive keepers at 5.5 million. Alisson and Lloris are the two I would avoid. Ederson I think could be a nice cheap way into the Man City defence, or cheap compared to the likes of Cancelo who are up at 7 million. So if you don't want to go for Cancelo, which is a bit of a risky option in itself, but Ederson could be still a nice way to cover those clean sheets if they do come. And then not spending too much, you can downgrade Cancelo to like a Chilwell and you're still only spending the same amount as if you had Cancelo and a 4.5 goalkeeper. So it's worth considering what kind of lineup you want to go with regards to that. But a 4.5 keeper in Raya seems to be the most popular in and throughout FPL history, going with a 4.5 keeper and no one on the bench really needed. Or some people can look at rotating goalkeepers. The likes of Dean Henderson, who's also priced at 4.5, does seem to rotate quite well with Raya. There are some nice rotation pairings which you can look at using the rotation planner. You guessed it, at FantasyFootballFix.com. Visit the website and links below in the description. But let's move into the defence then. No more faffing about. Cancelo, Trent Alexander-Arnold, Chilwell, James and Perisic. What a backline that is. Some massive names and some massive price tags as well. Trent Alexander-Arnold at 7.5 million, which although sounds expensive is still cheap for him. With Trent Alexander-Arnold, absolutely fantastic FPL asset. There's no real doubt about him. Most people are going to have him in their teams, definitely. Even if he's taken up one of those valuable Liverpool slots, we know we've got to have him and really Mo Salah in pretty much every draft we're creating so far at the start of the season. Cancelo then, as I mentioned, comes in at 7.0 million, a bit of a more premium price tag compared to the likes of the Chelsea fullbacks, but I still think he could be worth it. Some very impressive underlying data. Then Chilwell and James come in, and then Perisic too. So Perisic is the most controversial, I think, out of these defensive picks. We might not be thinking, what? He's really highly owned. Surely a lot of people are going for him with good reason. Well, there is good reason. He can be deployed as a winger at times in Conte's system. He's going to be deployed in that way where he's going to be getting a lot of attacking returns. If he can bring over what he was doing in the Serie A, he would actually outscore Trent Alexander-Arnold, which would be a very tough thing to do. But for a 5.5 million defender, that sounds like a pretty good plate to go with for the start of the season. However, there are a few cons with regards to Perisic. First up, rotation. Sessegnon seems to be the more favoured out of the other left-back options by Conte, but I do think that Perisic, who he does like more, will start the majority of games. There's Reguilon as well, but so there is competition for that left-back spot, is what I'm saying. And then also Perisic's age. He's 33, he doesn't play over 60 minutes that often. Well, he wasn't doing in the Serie A, so we know with FPL all too well that can risk one-pointers being substituted before the 60th minute, which is going to be especially an issue this year with the introduction of the 5 substitute rule, meaning that teams can make 5 subs. Left wing back or the wing back slots are ones where you've got to use a lot of energy. They're often substituted in games, and so out of the 5 subs, they're probably going to be some of the earliest made. So be prepared to have maybe a punch in the gut with regards to with trading off for a few attacking returns with Perisic. Maybe it will be interesting to see what his game time is like. But let's have a bit of a deeper look at the other premiums with regards to last year's statistics. Ben Chilwell comes in at outscoring with regards to the goals and the expected goals as well. It is very impressive, his data, but we do need to bear in mind he didn't play as many minutes as these other defenders. He got that injury, of course, that ruled him out all the way through the end of last season, and so even though his expected FPL points per game look really, really much better than the other 3 right here, we do need to consider the data is slightly skewed due to the fact he didn't play many minutes at all. Cancelo, Robertson and James also look like great options. Robertson's being a little bit forgotten about from what I've seen. I know I've said the Liverpool slots are really valuable, but I do think that we are perhaps even underestimating him a little bit too much. He was the highest scoring defender from the second half of last season, so maybe Robertson is one we do need to weigh up. Of course, the main debate will be regarding who do we spend that third Liverpool slot on, Robertson or Luis Diaz in midfield, seems to be the popular argument. Reece James then looks really good as well, outscores Chilwell in the assists and expected assist domains, the only ones where Chilwell doesn't lead the way out of these 4. And then João Cancelo, whose data is still impressive despite not being first in any of these categories. He of course played a really, really big amount of minutes compared to James and Chilwell at least last season. So yeah, that is the 4 premium defenders. If you want to break down the statistics from last season, very interesting to have a look at that. But we're going to move into the midfield now, into the midfield 3. I think we already know who one of the players is going to be in Mohamed Salah. So let's have a look then at who is coming in here. It's Salah, Diaz and Neto. So yeah, as predicted, Mo Salah makes his way in, as does Luis Diaz. With the fact that Robertson wasn't in the defence, I could have kind of predicted that. And then Neto as well, who looks a decent option to say the least. Diaz is an important one to touch on, I think, because that £8 million midfield slot seems to be absolutely stacked. We've got loads of options around there, not just Diaz but Saka. We've also got Kulusevski at Spurs. Man City have 2 with Mahrez and Foden. Mason Mount over at Chelsea. Even James Maddison, now that Leicester don't have any European football, could be a great shout. So having a player at that price point does make it easier to make transfers across if it turns out one of the other players seems to be in better form at the start of the season and you want to make just a single transfer without having to take loads of hits at the start of the season, which is important to try and refrain from doing. So having Diaz in this team is nice because it allows to have that kind of versatility throughout the squad where you can make transfers easily without having to tear up your kind of squad structure that you've deployed from game week 1, which is something I do really like. And then Neto down at that kind of cheaper price point is a very interesting one to touch on. If we look at Neto's data from last season, like with Chilwell, it is a little bit skewed because he didn't play a large number of minutes. But when we look at his FPL points and expected FPL points, which is the most impressive, per 90, 5.74 for a 5.5 million midfielder seems an absolute steal. The same with his goals and assist data. His expected data looks fantastic, and Wolves have some really nice fixtures off the bat. Game weeks 1 to 5, their only real hiccup is Spurs in game week 3. They face Leeds, Fulham, Newcastle and Bournemouth as well, as you can see down there at the bottom of your screen. So yeah, Neto looks like the favoured, the most template, to be honest, if you're looking over at Twitter, cheap budget midfielder, and it really is for good reason. He seems a fantastic option, the Portuguese man. So yeah, that is who I would be going with at that cheap defender slot as well. And then we've got a front 2 to touch on as well, and that's going to be Gabriel Jesus and also Erling Haaland coming in at 11.5 million. Really, the debate with Haaland is, do you go with him or do you go with Harry Kane? We're going to have one of them in our teams, as I mentioned, with keeping that kind of squad structure, it seems the way to go. Of course, it could end up not being that way. Haaland, I think, will avoid Pep Roulette. I think he's going to be an absolute monster in this league, to be honest, if he can bring over what he's been doing in the Bundesliga, and all the signs are pointing towards the fact that he will be able to do it, and he's even more highly owned than Mohamed Salah so far this season, and whether that's casuals bringing him in for the excitement, I think there is justification for it, and I think a lot of us are going to end up with Haaland in our teams, perhaps even people who don't fancy him, the people who think he might be another Werner, which he's not going to be, but famous last words. I think we're going to end up with him in our teams. Whether that's for fear of missing out or not, his effective ownership is going to be ridiculous come game week 1. And it all proves nicely that his captaincy rotates quite well with Mohamed Salah as well. Gabriel Jesus is the other one, and I did want to touch on him, and looking at really whether it's better to go with him up front in a 5-3-2, or switch out downgrading Jesus to a cheaper forward, and then upgrading one of the midfielders who's cheaper in this side, to go with the likes of Bukayo Saka, or indeed another £8 million midfielder. As I mentioned, there's so many players around that price point, that even getting 2 in could seem a nice possibility. So when we look at the data from last season, it is Jesus who leads the way. In terms of FPL points, his expected data as well is better, with throughout goals and assists. We do need to remember that there's a difference in positions here. So Jesus will score 1 less point for a goal, and he also won't be able to get clean sheet points with Arsenal at the start throughout the season at all. But at the start of the season, that's when they have some really nice fixtures, and I can see some clean sheets there. So I know it's only 1 point per game if they do delete one, but there is a noticeable difference between him and Bukayo Saka. There's also Martinelli to consider from Arsenal as well, who would say is more of a minutes risk than either of these guys, but a 6 million could be a nice position to go for if you don't fancy Pedro Neto, or even if you're going for more midfielders in your starting 11. But that is my take on Gabriel Jesus as an option. Let's have a look at the bench then and reveal. Not much to note really. Malcolm, Murphy, Greenwood, all just cheap options, and then Andreas Pereira at 4.5 million, who's more interesting, making the move across from Manchester United to Fulham, where he should be starting, of course. And having that 4.5 million option really does look a great pick. We weren't sure if there were going to be any actual starters who look any decent, but Andreas Pereira should be in the starting 11 and looks pretty decent. I know he's playing for Fulham, but still, I think he's the one to go for. If you've got 4.5 million and you need a midfielder just to sit on the bench, go for Andreas Pereira, is my opinion. And then finally now, let's touch on the captaincy. And the captain for game week 1 is going to be Mohamed Salah. As I mentioned, Salah and Haaland rotate really well with regards to captaincy and the armband. You get the likes of Bournemouth in game week 2, you switch it over to Haaland, and back to Salah for whenever he's got the best fixtures. So yeah, having Salah and Haaland are my favourite 2 premiums. Let me know if you are your favourites too. This draft, of course, doesn't have any Spurs attack, which is kind of, I'm seeing quite a lot, despite the fact, they're playing Southampton, who they've battered in the past multiple times in game week 1, and have some nice fixtures too, but we can't have them all. We know that all too well. Can't end up with minus 18 in the bank. We need to make some sacrifices, and to be honest, when I've done my sacrificing, I always end up with Salah and Haaland in my team, and it's good to see that the Elite 11 agree. So let me know what your takes are on this team down below. Do you think you've got a better draft? Let me know down below in the comments. I'll be there replying to every single one. If you're new around here, do remember to subscribe to the Fantasy Football Fix YouTube channel and drop a thumbs up if you did enjoy. It really does help us out here at Fantasy Football 6. So thank you for tuning in for our first ever video of the 22-23 season. I hope you have enjoyed yourself. Get down below in the comments for some discussion, and I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye.